So the first person we're going to have speaking is Makhanya here. He's a miner who's come all the way from South Africa to speak to us. I know a number of people will have gone to the meeting on Marikana on Saturday evening that took place, and there was a collection there for the Marikana support campaign. You may want to know that actually just over £800 was raised at that as well to help the support campaign. So, Makhanya, over to you.
I'm greeting everyone on this house in this afternoon in the name of the mine workers, 65,000 mine workers at Amplas, the company that I'm working there. As the mine worker, I'm not just only the mine worker, I am the socialist, I am the freedom fighter. We have been waiting for the 19 years revolution in South Africa, waiting for the empty promises as the mine workers. Until today, we didn't achieve it. As the youngest mine workers that have been working in South Africa, we have seen our father, our grandfather, even ourselves working on the mines and become poor. We said we are the last generation who are going to become poor in South Africa. Our previous strikes, we have taken place last year, have opened our mind, have opened our South Africans' mind to realize that we have power to demand everything in our government. So we said in the next elections, we want to vote out this capitalism government. In the next election, we want to see a better life to all. In the next election, we will force to move South Africa somewhere. Our brothers and our sisters, they were get died at Marikana previous years. It's not only them. Different mines in South Africa, they got shoot and killed the mine workers. So for that reason, we are forced to wake up and fight for the reality. So, our last demand that we have put on the table as South Africans, not only the mine workers, we are demanding a better life to all. We are demanding a better living condition. We are demanding the better wages. We are demanding electricity and water. We are sick and tired to stay in the squatter camp. We said nothing wrong to be a mine workers, nothing wrong to be a South African, but something's wrong for those who are suppressing us and for those who are undermining us. We will fight until to the end. We also like to thank the support that we have got in the different countries in the world. We have got a support even from Americans during our strike. We still thanks for this opportunity, even to come and talk on these meetings. Means a lot to us because we prefer to share some problem that we have in South Africa than to keep quiet, although there is some problem behind ourselves. So we hopefully, in the next negotiating that we've already opened, will end up around September. There is some better living wage that we're going to receive, or else there is a huge strike that we're going to see in South Africa. So those are the problems that we have been faced in previous times. As South Africans, we believe that we can change these skulls of South Africans become the stars. We believe that this problem that we face in South Africa is not only the problem of South African. Tomorrow will be Egypt. Maybe tomorrow will be American. So maybe you can need the support from everywhere to anyone who can support you. So I will not going to talk much on this room today. I believe it's my last day. I must move away from South Africa to live the reality life that I lived of struggling. But in closing, I can say that I've seen the better country than the country I'm living, because I'm still staying in the squatter camp. I'm still believing that I'm not this kind of a leader who's going to come and address in the boardroom as I'm here today. I believe that when there's a shooting, when there's tackling, my body must be counted in the ground. I'm not just like to see myself in the radio, in the TV. I believe to work in the ground. So I thanks a chance to come and address today. Thank you.
Our next speaker, if you hadn't worked it out, is Eamonn McCann. He's a leading socialist who's been active in Ireland since the 19... See, rallies are normally quite straightforward, Chair, but you're not even letting me finish describing people before you're welcoming them. But as I say, Eamonn McCann, I think that's all I needed to say, Eamonn.
Okay. It struck me in the immediate aftermath and the upsurge that followed our comrades' a contribution. Something just to think, we don't have any problems, do we? But as long as you have that sort of feeling, as long as you have that sort of experience, as long as you have that sense that we're all together, that it's a heady thing to happen to us and a heady thing to happen to span thousands of miles. Just to hear that and to sit here and to feel it and to rise to it, in a way, that's all that we need. In a way, the solution to all of our problems and all of our bickering at times and all of the unhappiness that we sometimes experience in the revolutionary movement, it's all solved there. It's only in that context that we can solve it all. And you see many problems around the world. You wonder how they can be solved, and then suddenly you get a glimpse of what might work. If you're watching the television in the last couple of days, watching the news, you'll have seen the depressing news from Belfast about riots on the Shankill Road and in other Protestant areas, as overwhelmingly working-class Protestants come out and express their rage that an Orange March wasn't allowed to go adjacent to the Catholic community in Ardoyne. Just as in December and January, if you were listening and watching, you'll have seen people coming out in thousands, blocking roads and waving Union Jacks in protest against the fact that Belfast City Council had decided not to fly the Union flag, that 365 days of the year, but only to fly it for the same number of days as it is flown in local government buildings and town halls and so forth in the rest of what they call the United Kingdom, 18 days a year. No suggestion that they would fly the Irish tricolour, no suggestion that they would fly the red flag, but the Union flag for 18 days in a year. And it's the most amazing thing when people came out and stood on the streets night after night saying, no, 18 days is not enough. We want our Union flag up there 365 days. And you can analyse it in all sorts of ways. There's a patronising article in the Guardian this morning which says that these people are innocent and alienated, that they don't understand the modern world and so forth. That what they'll have to do, people will have to preach harder at them. That's basically what it said. Preach harder at them, to try to convince them to behave in a better and more civilised way. If that worked in Northern Ireland or anywhere else, there wouldn't be a problem in the world. But I have seen the answer. I've seen the answer. Anybody who's in the SWP has seen the answer to sectarianism in Northern Ireland. Let me tell you a brief story. Some of the riots in the last few days have been on the Shankill Road, and no wonder that it's going to be on the Shankill Road, the heartland of the Ulster Defence Association, one of the iconic areas of Belfast, loyalism, 100% Protestant working-class area, the type of an area that just a few years ago I wouldn't have walked through, and I'm not sure I'd walk through it today either. But there was a day when I could walk through it. I remember it well, maybe because it was the only time when it was possible for me to walk through it and not to feel the slightest frisson of fear, but to feel instead a welcome from the area and from the people of the area. That happened in the context of a march to do with the postal strike, an unofficial postal strike in Belfast, which had begun when a worker on the Shankill Road was sacked. The workers came out from the sorting depot there, and they discovered that within a couple of hours, after a few phone calls, the Falls Road, the all-Catholic Falls Road depot, came out as well. And that launched an unofficial postal strike across Belfast. It lasted for 3.5 weeks. Was sort of never supported by the union bureaucracy, of course, because it hadn't gone through the proper procedures and all the rest of it. They came out, eventually it was a successful strike as well. But because I've been making a bit of noise, sort of in the newspapers and elsewhere about this strike, when they're having a march, I got a phone call saying, will you come up and speak at the march? I said, yeah, no problem. When I arrived in Belfast, I discovered that this march was going up the Shankill Road. And then through the place and coming down the Falls Road, up the Shankill and down the Falls. And I've been at loads and loads of marches. I hadn't been at one like that. So we came along, and as we started the march up the Shankill Road, because I was the sort of invited speaker, you know, sort of, I'm in the front line of this march. So I'm marching up to the Shankill Road, big post to support the postal workers and all the rest of it. And I was a wee bit nervous, I can tell you. In fact, I said to some people, do you really think it's a good idea for me to be in the front row? Perhaps 6 rows back, where I could duck down and hide if necessary, might be a more suitable place. I mean, discretion being the better part of valour and all that. He said, nah, you'll be all right. Just get in there sort of in the middle of the front row, which I did. As we walked up the Shankill Road, on about 6 occasions, people came off the pavement. Pavements were lined with people. People came off the pavement and approached me, and they all said the same thing. Virtually to a syllable, they all said the same thing. You're very welcome on the Shankill Road, Mr. McCann. I remember distinctly that they called me Mr. McCann. Most people don't, you know. You're very welcome on the Shankill Road, Mr. McCann. And we got up to the peace line at the top of the Shankill. There's peace walls. If you're reading carefully, no particular reason you should, but if you're reading carefully the reports of the last few days, you will have seen in the Sunday Times, the Observer and the Guardian, sort of those sort of snob Sunday papers and the rest of them, people saying that it's a terrible thing, isn't it? That these peace walls are still there, these peace barriers, all these years after the Belfast Agreement. They've got these things. And there's one that divides the Shankill from the Falls. There's an opening in it, not an opening, there's a gate which you can open, but it's called Lanark Way. So we reached Lanark Way, and that was where the meeting was held. As they opened the gate, so between the Shankill and the Falls, and there was a little platform set up, and we all got up to speak. I tell you, sort of, please don't think I'm being immodest or self-regarding when I say that my little talk went down very well. And I don't think it was what I said. It was just the fact that I was there to say it. Sort of, which people welcomed and so forth. And I thought to me, and then we walked down the Falls, back to the city centre, and that was that particular day's experience over. But I fell to thinking, as I would, as anybody would afterwards, in what other context could I walk up the Shankill Road? People know that I was involved in the civil rights movement. They know that I've been involved in the hunger strike campaign, involved for prisoners, mainly Republican prisoners and the rest of it. They know all that. Because it's been a very public activity. In what other context could I have walked up the Shankill Road and people come off the pavement and said, you're very welcome? Only in the context of class struggle. There is no other context in which this could happen. When you look back over our history, you look over the history, the conventional history of Northern Ireland, they will tell you that there's Catholic nationalists and Protestant unionists, and they've been fighting. You see this written in so many words. They've been fighting for 350 years. You wouldn't expect them to stop now. Well, of course, that's a caricature anyway. That we've been fighting all that time, sort of, and who is the we when they say that we have been fighting all that time. But if you look back through your history and try to identify occasions when large numbers of Catholic and Protestant working class people, and it's always the working class who bears the brunt of sectarian disputes everywhere. If you look back and ask yourself, what were the occasions in history, not just a couple of years ago in the context of a particular industrial dispute, what are the occasions in history when sizable numbers of Catholic and Protestant workers have detached themselves from their own community, so to speak, and joined hands together? When were they? It has never been as a result of moralistic preaching. It has never been as a result of people telling working class people in Northern Ireland, look, you ought to be more civilised. Look, you're deterring inward investment by this behaviour. That has never worked. It never worked. It is only when people were on occasions in situations where they hadn't come together as Catholics and Protestants to be nice to one another, but had come together in a context which had nothing to do with the community you came from and everything to do with the class that you belonged to. Those are the occasions: 1907, 1911, 1919, 1932, and in our own day, in a less dramatic way, perhaps, in the campaigns to defend the health service, to defend the public service generally over recent years, where you have seen thousands, in some occasions 20,000 people in the centre of Belfast. You stand on a platform like that, it's a simple fact. You can't tell who are Catholics and Protestants. The people in the crowd don't know who's a Catholic or a Protestant. It's not true that you can tell the difference between us, by the distance between the eyes or whatever it's supposed to be. We all look the same, and on occasions like that, we all sound the same, and we all think the same, because it's simple that what we are defending is something which is in common. Only class can do that. Only class holds out any hope of solving the sectarian problem in Northern Ireland. And if that's true in the north of Ireland, we are not a unique place, much as so on occasion we like to think of ourselves as terribly unique. I see a lot of nonsense talked every night, just occurs to me, about the Northern Ireland peace process being a model for conflicts elsewhere. It's like a little export industry now in Northern Ireland. There's little squads of people, experts, who will be sent out to the Balkans. They even have people out in Sri Lanka a couple of years back. That worked out very well, didn't it? In various other places, about how we did it. Nothing to do with it at all. Nothing to do, not a clever plan devised by Bill Clinton and Tony Blair and the rest of them. They had next to nothing to do with it. What happened in Northern Ireland is when it came to the crunch, the vast majority of Protestant people had no stomach for a war to keep their Catholic neighbours out of office, and the vast majority of Catholic working class people had no stomach for a war to change the constitution if that was going to mean conflict with their Protestant neighbours. That's the basis of the peace process in Northern Ireland. It came from below to an extent which is never acknowledged. It wasn't imposed or gifted to us from above. It came from the way people actually think deeply about their own position in society. It was in a way, an expression in a mild way of what I talked about in relation to the Shankill Road. That's what gave rise to the peace to the extent that we have it at the moment, and that's the way forward in the future. A sectarian conflict has got only one answer, and that's what I'm saying is the struggle of the class. And if that's true about Northern Ireland, it's true elsewhere. It's true everywhere around the world. If you just put it like that and say we're going to preach class struggle and so forth, then naturally that's be an abstraction and it's not going to work. Why was I able to do that on the Shankill Road? I tell you something, this a counterintuitive, I believe that's the phrase, it's an apparent contradiction. I've always wanted to use the word counterintuitive, but I've never quite had the confidence to do it. But it's counterintuitive. I actually think that if I had been the type of person who had never stood up for civil rights, who had never stood up for equality, for the Catholic working class and for the Catholic community generally, if I had never involved myself in that, I actually don't believe I would have been welcomed, because people would have seen me as a shallow-minded and shifty person with nothing in particular to offer them. It's only when you stand up for minorities, it's only when you stand up for the oppressed groups in society that you have any hope of making yourself relevant to the generality of the working class. And this has got lessons. And there are lessons here to do with how we combat racism, lessons on how we combat Islamophobia, lessons on how we combat sexism, and then all those things that divide the working class and those divisions upon which capitalism depends. If you give an inch to racism within the trade union movement, in your workplace, or in movements, or in your own organisation, if you give an inch to it, then not only have you no right to expect to be accepted by those against whom racism is directed, there is no chance whatsoever that you will be accepted as an honest representative of the working class by white people or whatever the dominant section of that society is, by the working class of that section. It won't, because they'll recognise you as a shifty person who's trying to maneuver behind their backs. It's only when you stand up sort of in principle and all in relation to all these divisions that you can expect to build anything which is going to take on a capitalism. And I know that we all accept this. We all know this. We all know in relation to sexism that we don't tolerate. We do not tolerate sexist language in unions, in the workplace, in the movements. We don't tolerate it in our own organisation. We don't tolerate any other manifestation of sexism in the unions, in the workplace, in the movement, in our own organisation. I know we all believe that. I know that nobody could possibly object to me saying that. And if we all accept that, then there is no difficulty currently afflicting us which we cannot solve. None whatsoever, as long as it's in that context. And any difference is what we have. And there's no point going around, I'm not the type of person who could possibly do it anyway, of avoiding issues and all the rest of it. There are conflicts. Our party in Ireland, in relation to the current dispute, actually took a different position to the party in England. Britain. Does that mean for a moment that I'm not going to be here next year? Does it mean for a moment that I'm not going to be able to collaborate and to work together with all the comrades that I've worked together with over decades and not just years? Of course it doesn't mean that. Of course I know that deep down, we all believe in the same things. That we all know that there are issues of principle and there are issues of tactics and of strategy and the rest of it. And the issue of the non-toleration of opposition to any manifestation of sexism in our movement, that's not a tactical issue. That's not a strategic issue. That's an issue of bedrock principle. And as I say, as long as that is accepted, once that is accepted, then there are no difficulties currently afflicting us that need lead to any damage to our party and our movement. We live, as Colin Barker was saying just a little while ago, little over an hour ago, we live in tumultuous times. We live in an era of the biggest mass demonstrations against authority and against capitalism in my lifetime, and I've had a longer lifetime than most of the people in this hall. When we look at South Africa, we look at Egypt, there is not sentimentality. When we look at Brazil, when we look at Turkey, when we look at all these places, it is not sentimentality to say that we are trembling on the brink of something great as revolutionary socialists. Shame on us! Shame on us if we don't take those opportunities that are before us. One last thing before I go, if I may. Is that okay?
Yeah,
yes. There have been an awful lot of people in Ireland in the last few years saying, isn't it terrible that the Irish working class hasn't risen up? Why aren't we like the Greeks? Why aren't we rioting in the streets? Because austerity has been very, very bad, very, very strong in the Republic of Ireland. And allegedly, Greek workers were chanting, we are not Irish, we are Greek. Now, I actually don't believe that was actually chanted, but it is said that it was chanted, as an example of how timid we are. And it's true that there have been great difficulties in organising at a grassroots level to get a movement and sustaining a movement which was commensurate of the task of fighting austerity that was before us. And then something happens unexpectedly, something which is not tried and tested because you didn't realise it was actually there. That out of the darkness, out of the West came the case of Savita Halappanavar, an Indian woman denied an abortion who died as a result of it. And suddenly, there were tens of thousands of people on the street. Suddenly, the name Savita required no further explanation. Oh, you just have to say it in Ireland and more widely. Savita, and people know what you're talking about. And that forced a change in the law. It forced the Parliament to meet in emergency session. Now, the law that they passed is extremely inadequate. But what it has done is to find very restricted circumstances in which abortion is lawful in Southern Ireland. And once any example is given, or any context is given in which abortion is lawful, the arguments change forever. It no longer is should abortion be allowed, but in what circumstances should abortion be lawful. That great change has come about as a result of huge demonstrations out of the blue. And what is more, our party in Ireland, I hope everybody knows this, punched so far above its weight that it was almost unbelievable. A huge demonstration, a spontaneous demonstration outside Dáil Éireann, outside the Parliament in Dublin. There were 9 speakers. 3 of them were from the SWP. Not because we had manoeuvred, not because there wasn't time to manoeuvre. It was the sudden grassroots and efflorescence of anger which seized people in Southern Ireland. We were there because we had a record of fighting, because we had fought sexism, we had fought for the rights of women, we had fought against the Catholic Church and its influence in Irish society. And that's why we were there. And we had never and in the end, we talk all the time, and rightly so, about trying and testing out different ideas and different strategies. That wasn't tried and tested. That because there was no time to try it and test it. We got to be ready for things like that. But our opportunity, the chances of us seizing those opportunities, depend entirely on the record which we've established in preceding years when there's nothing much happening. We fought sexism in all its manifestations. We didn't tolerate a hint of it, a suggestion of it, particularly within our own organisation. That is why we were in a position then to involve ourselves in that. And that position will feed into the working class generally. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker, I'm going to try and introduce them quickly now to get it all in. Our next speaker is Maria Stylou, who's a leading member of SEC, which is our sister organisation in Greece. So, Maria.
In today's Financial Times, there is an article by Münchau, and he puts a paragraph which actually describes very well the situation. The economies of Greece, Portugal, Ireland, Cyprus, Spain, and Italy have collapsed and are mostly still contracting. In this situation, comrade, in the situation where the economy is collapsing, the ruling classes presenting all the attacks as successes, and the ruling class in Greece and in Athens actually today passes a law through the parliament which says that it's allowed to sack 25,000 public workers with a permanent job from the schools, from the local authorities, from the hospitals. That's the situation. So you understand, when this is the contradiction, the big contradiction, while the economy is falling apart, capitalism is falling apart, the governments are trying really to impose the most vicious and barbarous attack in the working class. This is the problem of, in Greece, now there is a revolt. It's not just a strike, it's a revolt. This is what's happening as a result, really, of this barbaric attack. What I mean a revolt? I mean that a month ago, today it's 35 days, the National Broadcasting Company is being occupied by their workers, 2,600 workers. And today, the 2,600 workers are broadcasting the strike, the general strike that starts tomorrow. That's the idea. The general strike starts tomorrow morning, but in Greece, everything has stopped. The municipal workers have occupied all the town halls since last Friday. The teachers have occupied not the schools, because the schools are closed because of vacations, but they occupied public buildings that they related to the schools. And the hospitals are ready really to continue the strike until the next week. So that's the way that we go when I say there is a revolt. And in every neighborhood now, they create local committees where the strikers ask all the neighbors and the unemployed some comrades were asking me, what are you doing with unemployed? Have you got a different sort of movement? The question is not what we are doing with the unemployed, it's what the organized working class is doing with the unemployed. And the organized working class now is organized so they can fight centrally, but in each neighborhood, in each locality, it creates coordinating committees where you've got teachers, you've got hospital workers, you have municipal workers, and pensioners and unemployed working together for the success of today, for tomorrow's general strike, and for the continuation of all this. So it's tremendous support. The whole thing is expanding tremendously, and it's very possible that not only tomorrow, but on Wednesday, the general strike continues. It's not that the TUC and the Public Workers Union want to continue. They don't. But it might continue from below. It might continue from below. Actually, the general strike starts today. Tonight, there are all the unions that are going to Syntagma Square in order to encircle the parliament, because this day starts, the discussion starts in the parliament. They can continue encircling the parliament tomorrow when there is a general strike. And the decision is that there's going to be another encircling on Wednesday, and probably if there is no general strike, it will be strikes from different sections that they are really in the middle of this fight. So that's the situation in Greece, and I think it's the situation, if we generalize, it can be the situation in all around the world. In all around the world, because it's the same. I mean, the bosses now, they are in a mess. The governments are as weak as ever, but they are still barbarous. They are attacking in a situation that can really pass all those attacks. It's amazing. In this period, in the middle of the strike, Schäuble decides that he's going to visit in Athens. And he's coming on Thursday. He really waits for that. I mean, after 3 days of strike, Schäuble is going to be on Thursday to say goodbye, hello, and very successful attack on the working class. So that's the way that they provoke. And it's not like they provoke. They really get the answer immediately. So you understand, we've got to really to build a huge movement now. We have to build a huge, not only a successful strike, but to continue on for the whole summer. So you understand, it's not an easy summer. It's not a summer really that there are vacations or there are or whatever you think it. It's a summer really that this week is those strikes. The hospital workers start on Monday next week with all the hospital workers from all around Greece, and it can be a march next Wednesday in the middle of Athens. Plus the teachers have decided that the schools are now closed because of the vacation, and I said that from the 1st of September, they go for an unlimited strike. They had their conference, and they decided that inside the conference. But, I mean, it's amazing. In such a situation where the working class is in the center, it has tremendous successes in bringing down 3 governments. The third one was a month ago, really, when the government decided that it's going to sack and close down the National Broadcasting Company. The National Broadcasting Company went on occupation, and the government collapsed. That's the situation. In a situation like that, you've got ideas inside the left that really are crazy. You think that they are dead, but they are not dead. It's like what Tony Cliff was saying. The ideas really die until the end. And it's very important. You've got ideas that, what working class? It's not working class. What strikes? Let's find other forms of fighting, really, than the workers. The workers now are being controlled by the bureaucracy, and you can't really free from them. The strikes is a very costly thing. Let's find a way really of another protest. There are fights inside. I mean, you can't believe it. It's not a general idea. You had the students in Greece. Well, they are very militant. They started with occupations in 2006, in 2007. They almost opened this, you can say, the new period of fights. And you had inside the universities now a discussion, what the students, we used to have a slogan in Athens, in Greece, which is students, workers, one voice, one fist. And the funny thing is how you explain that fist. Who is the fist and who holds the fist? And it's amazing. You go to the universities and you have to fight that the fist are the workers, and the students are not, it's not students' revolution, but it's workers' revolution, and the students have to be with the workers in the factories and bring the whole message in the schools, etc. It really reminds me, comrades, of '68 in LSE. In LSE, you had the IS was a tiny group then, but there were all those Maoists and all those Fourth International people. And they could stand there in a big meetings, and they were really saying the Fourth International are students' power, red bases inside the universities, and the Maoists were saying peasants' power, third world, etc. That's what we were listening. And of course, you had Cliff there saying, oh, you guys, all right, come up. What's going to happen tomorrow morning if you're going to come at 6 o'clock at this Barbican site because there are workers there? And you see, you sense who is right. That's actually what reminds me today. I mean, how things, you think they moved 45 years after. But the wrong ideas, even in those periods, they still survive. So it's tremendous. I mean, it's very important to have political debates in this period. Things are not going automatically, really. They're not being solved automatically of how we deal with those problems. It's not like, because, I mean, comrades from Cairo, comrades from Egypt were telling us the same stories. I mean, how those who are coming last in the fights, in the struggles, in the revolt, they are coming with the old ideas, and they try really to understand where they're standing. So it's very important in this period where really new people are coming in the fight, new workers, youngsters, etc., are coming to the fight. They are coming to the struggle from the universities, from everybody, from the schools, from everywhere. It's very important that you keep on going with the fights and the arguments, because we've got to win them. And the thousands, when PASOK collapsed, the social democracy in Greece collapsed. From the 44%, it's now of 8%, 6%, probably 5%. No one knows. So you understand how those ideas, I mean, these people move to the left, but they move to the left, having all the old ideas, and you've got to fight. The second thing that you've got to fight, do we need a revolutionary party, or do we need really a broad left alliance? And it's a big, I mean, particularly in a country where you've got Syriza, the left reformist party, going from 4% to 27%. It's obvious that people are saying, that's the easiest solution, let's join them, let's go there. And they got the answer. That's the worst thing, comrades. Syriza had its conference this weekend. I'm not happy to say that, but it had the conference. And what happened in the conference, there were two things. The one thing is they moved openly to the right because they say, we are fighting for a government, not for a left government, for a government, which means we can ally with anybody, that we can even break away from New Democracy. And the other thing it did is it stopped the functioning of all the groups, really, left-wing groups, revolutionary groups that form Syriza. And that's one of the groups that they actually, they say you can't operate anymore, was a breakaway from us on 2001. It was a group that broke away because it said life is easier. It's not the way that you are doing it. It's not every day in the factories. It's not every day building the party. It's not every day the newspaper, etc. Life is easier with them. And they really give, you can say, all their energy to build the Syriza. And today, Syriza decides, they had the conference, and in majority of 70%, they decided no group is being accepted with whatever. No group can work independently of the central leadership. It means from Tsipras, which is under the auspices of Tsipras, and only one way under the direction of electoral party. That's how it goes, really. So from this point of view, it's very important that we not only we argue, but we fight for this revolutionary party. And the last thing, comrades, is how really we fight against all the divisions that the ruling class tried to impose us. And we know that in Greece, what it means to fight against the fascism and Islamophobia and racism, etc. And it's very important because not only you fight, but also you get the trade unions with you. It's important because the trade union, which is in the center of the strikes now, Municipal Workers Union, had an announcement that says no Golden Dawn member or Golden Dawn MP is going to cross our rallies, our meetings, our gatherings. We shoot them out. We close the door. That's very important. You know, because they try really to say, yeah, we support the strikes, we go their members wherever they are, and they try really to make all the strikes are for the Greeks, the money is for the Greeks, the places are for the Greeks, and so on and so forth. The jobs are for the Greeks, and so on. So it's tremendous, this fight. So this fight that we give consistently, but also that we can actually have the unions with us. So in the middle of something that it is revolt, it's not a revolution, it's a revolt of the working class against the bosses. You've got to argue for all those things. You need a revolutionary party that can be in the center, it can have roots in the working class, it can have roots on every places and fight for the success of the struggle, and on the other time, really argue for those things. Argue for the revolutionary ideas, not in abstract, but in those concrete terms, so you can really pull all these people, all the newcomers, that they are really for the first time in the struggle, they are from social democracy, etc., you can pull them towards you. That's the way, actually, that you can influence the left parts, even inside the reformist parties. That's how we are. It's a tough job. It would be an easier job to just follow what's happening, and then from time to time, you know, I don't agree, I am with you, probably I am with you. It's what Tony Cliff said, the rabbi, that is with you and with the other, because we are not with you and with the other, we are for this sort of thing. It's very important, comrade. And because what we are saying, in 2003, they were saying a new superpower, you remember the anti-war demos, etc., a new superpower. This new superpower now is the working class and the revolutionary left. That's the way that we can go. That's the way that we can win. That's the way that we are not going to give our victories, like in '68, to all those thieves. we are going to win. And that's how we can do it.
And our last speaker for the rally is Charlie Kimber, who's National Secretary of the Socialist Workers' Party. Charlie.
Thank you, comrades. When we were thanking people earlier, one person was left out, and lots of people have worked incredibly hard to make this a successful Marxism, but probably because she wrote the list, her name wasn't on it. I want to say a big thank you to Amy Leather for all the work she's done. It's been an absolute privilege to be part of this Marxism from the first evening when Marion Nesbitt opened with that electrifying speech about the bedroom tax to listening to the speeches today. It's been an incredible weekdays of learning, of discussion and debate, and of creating the sense of a movement going forward together. One of the things that you learn at Marxism, of course, is the power of our tradition, of our ideas. One of those is that simply eliminating one or two ruling class figures wouldn't change the world very much, and that's why we're against individual terrorism. I still believe in that. Though occasionally it's very tempting not to. And I was thinking about that when I was reading about Lord Freud the other day. You know Lord Freud, don't you? He's the man in charge of the bedroom tax. Stop people having spare bedrooms. He lives in two houses, one of which has 8 spare bedrooms, and the other has 3 spare bedrooms. So there he is, the man with 11 spare bedrooms, monitoring the bedroom tax, to drive working class people out of their homes because they dare to have too many rooms. Anyway, that's not the crime I want to accuse him of this afternoon. He was talking about food banks, and he was attacked in the House of Lords. Did he think perhaps there was a link between the attacks on benefits and the rise in the number of people using food banks? It wasn't a hostile person attacking him, it was the Bishop of Truro who was attacking him. Anyway, this revolutionary, the Bishop of Truro, raises this with him, says, did he think there might be a link? And Freud says, no, it's very, very hard to see such a link between them. Indeed, what's probably happening is that because we've created the food banks, people have started to think they ought to use them. I'm not joking, this is what Freud said. This is the problem. Once you create a food bank, lots of people will see there's free food there and turn up. If you didn't have the food bank, it would be fine. So on the same basis, if you see the problem, if you build a hospital, people start feeling ill. If you didn't have the hospital, everyone would be fine. The problem is people start founding undertakers, and then people start dying. If you didn't, we'd live forever. If you start a benefit system, people start living in it. Oh, they do believe that, don't they? So, we shouldn't forget the crimes of these people. When I was reading about Freud, I stumbled on an article in the Daily Telegraph. An investigation has found people living in one of the worst areas of Britain for homelessness are using a network of sandstone caves to live in. Stockport has seen an increase of 42% in the number of people unable to put a roof over their heads in the last year. People have been sleeping rough in the caves. Who are these people? Some of them are East European migrants. Local shelter, the Wellspring, say they've been used by many others with nowhere else to go. The charity's project manager says there's been a particular surge in more middle-class people who worked for years only to suddenly lose everything in the downturn. That's Tory Britain for you. People who thought they had a secure job suddenly pitched into absolute poverty, and that's with 20% of the cuts implemented by this government. That's the scale of the charge. I suggest we don't forget the brutalities that the other side are capable. I suggest that we don't forget as well that we've discovered over the last few months. I mean, you probably thought that the depth of racism and corruption around Stephen Lawrence had been plumbed by the cops. But oh no, one of them comes forward and says that in 1993, he was tasked not to find the killers of Stephen Lawrence, but to infiltrate the family and find dirt on them. That's what he was told to do. They weren't worried about catching the racist killers. They had to try and destroy the credibility of the Lawrence family and those who supported them. Let's understand that the police remain racist, corrupt, our enemies, and we will need to continue to fight for our rights in every campaign and every battle. And it's not just here, the verdict in the Trayvon Martin case is a horrific example of the racism that exists in the United States. And we'll be joining a demonstration at the United States Embassy tomorrow, and I hope as many people will join us around that. We've had plenty of evidence of the brutality of the Tories and their system, but also we've had fantastic examples of resistance spoken to us at Marxism. How great it was to hear from Sami Naguib from Egypt. 17 million people on a single day taking to the streets. Someone said to me that maybe there were bigger demonstrations in 1989 in China. Maybe there were, although China's quite a big place, you know. But to see that is a world historic moment. Makhanya is a living embodiment of a world historic struggle. The struggle in South Africa against the most brutal multinational corporations. Men working 2 kilometres beneath the earth to dig minerals that are worth billions, earning £80 a week. But they stood up, and even when 34 of them were mown down by the South African police, they continued to fight, and they won. And all of us are in their debt, because it's another example that however brutal the other side are, when the working class moves, when the working class organises, when the working class fights, it still has the power to defeat even the most ruthless enemies, and that's important for us to remember. We need a bit of that spirit here, don't we? We're not going to get it from the Labour Party. Falkirk, there was an opportunity for Ed Miliband to tell people that if you thought they were too left-wing, let me be clear, they're going to cut themselves off completely from any sense of control by organised working-class people. That's what Miliband is trying to do, to create a gulf between the trade union movement and the Labour Party. And he's added to it, hasn't he, that just in case you thought you might be voting for them because they were going to be different to the Tories, don't worry, they're not. They're going to implement the same spending plans that the Tories have done. We desperately need an alternative to the Labour Party. And I'll say on behalf of the SWP that we're prepared to work with anyone to build a bigger, broader challenge to the left of the Labour Party, to do it at elections, to think about how socialists from different groups and different parties can come together to make a bigger, stronger left-wing challenge, because we definitely need it against Labour. And we also need much more struggle from the trade unions, because the truth is that the trade union leaders have sold us short of what was required. I noticed that Francis O'Grady, the leader of the TUC, spoke very well at the People's Assembly about that it's class war in Britain at the moment. It is class war. The trouble is only one side's fighting. And we need much more of the sense of our trade union movement not giving in, but encouraging and supporting every working class person who wants to fight back. And one of the key things we have to do over the next few months is to make sure that in every struggle that we're involved, we're building a bigger network of people who can pressure the trade union leaders to fight, but can also act independently of them whenever that's possible. And we'll be doing that in building for the demonstration in Manchester on the 29th of September. And you can have the afternoon off, but the building for that begins tomorrow. Because we can't wait till after the summer, it'll be too late. We have to go into the trade unions, we have to go into the communities, we have to say, the 29th of September, everyone needs to get there. Of course, it's about the health service. Health service, workers on a pay freeze, managers getting huge pay rises, waiting times going up, people not receiving the treatment that they ought to. It is about the health service. Their attempt to privatise and sell it off to the fat cats. Of course it's about the health service. But it's also about every other campaign in Britain. And whether you're angry about the bedroom tax, whether you're angry about the attacks on our schools, whether you're angry about racism, whether you're angry about the cops, you need to get to Manchester on the 29th of September for a huge demonstration which can bring our fury against the Tories. We have to build that from today. At the same time, we know there's another audience of people who want to go much further than the trade union leaders are presently prepared to go. We saw it in the vote for Jerry Hicks against Len McCluskey. We saw it in the votes at the trade union conferences. You can feel it, of thousands of people who want much more than is on offer at the moment. And that's why we'll be building for a conference of Unite the Resistance on the 19th of October, which will bring together those people who want to fight in that way. We'll be strengthening the campaign over the bedroom tax. The truth is we could win over the bedroom tax if we could build the campaign in every estate, in every town and city, if we could make it something that the trade union movement is forced to support. We can beat the Tories over that, and by doing that, we would open the way to destroying more of their attacks. We'll be building the People's Assemblies, which give us an opportunity to talk wider groups of people and to create unity in our areas. And we'll also be taking up the question of the privatisation of Royal Mail. I think the Tories have made a mistake about privatising Royal Mail. You remember Thatcher famously was against attempting to do it. She said she didn't want to remove the Queen's heads from stamps. I'm in favour of removing the Queen's head, not just from stamps. But when they did a poll immediately after the plans were announced, 78% of people said they were against the privatisation of Royal Mail. That's a very good beginning for any campaign. Only 4% of people were strongly in favour of privatising Royal Mail. I wonder if the 4% are. I've never met anyone who's strong. But anyway, maybe it was a few Tories, maybe some heads of privatised mail firms, and maybe some dogs who prefer a richer collection of delivery people arriving down their paths. But it's a small minority in any case. And this is a real opportunity for all of us to get involved around that sort of campaign. It's not just about the struggle in the workplaces, though the working class is crucial. The other crucial element that has emerged is the struggle against fascism, against the EDL, and against racism. We should be proud that the EDL was not able to capitalise on the Woolwich murder because of the work that Unite Against Fascism did. That wasn't inevitable. It required organisation. It required revolutionary socialists in the leadership. It required the groups that have been built up and down the country. We need to continue that crucial work of building Unite Against Fascism, because we know that however often they are pushed back, the fascists and the EDL will attempt to come back again. And on Birmingham on Saturday, we will protest against the EDL, and we will protest wherever the EDL attempt to march. We also have to deal with a wider racism. The truth is, racism and Islamophobia are being pushed not just by the BNP or the EDL, they're being pushed by the traditional parties as well. One of the great failings of the Labour Party leadership is to have bent to the argument that too many immigrants were let into Britain under New Labour and that this was its biggest mistake. The biggest mistake is not to stand up to the racist myths that are promulgated about immigrants. The people to blame for the crisis in Britain are not immigrants, they're the bosses, the bankers and the politicians who support them. And the message goes out clearly from here. The problem is not the Romanians and the Bulgarians, the problem is the Etonians. I want to finish with the necessity for revolutionary organisation. Because all those great struggles in Turkey, in Brazil, in Indonesia, in Bulgaria, in Egypt, in South Africa have posed starkly not just the inspiration, but the fact that there are big political issues at the centre of it, that it needs leadership in order to chart a path that can bring the working class to power. And that can't be built in the course of that struggle, it has to be built in advance. We need a revolutionary organisation at the centre of all of the struggles that I've spoken about, helping to raise the level of fight back, helping to make sure that our side is victorious. And we have a big responsibility. We've had 5 days of discussion and debate. Those discussions and debates must continue. No revolutionary party can base itself on anything except continual discussion and debate. But we also need unity. We can't have fixed divisions among us that prevent us being effective. And therefore we need to have a united party that is capable of moving forward, a party that knows that we can be proud of what we've done fighting fascism, that can be proud of what we've done fighting against women's oppression, that can be proud of what we've done raising the level of fight back against the bedroom tax and against all the attacks that working class people face, that can be proud of its role inside the workplaces and can be proud of what it's done in putting forward an alternative to the blood and filth of capitalism. We have a heavy responsibility because Britain is not so rich in revolutionary socialists that it can blithely countenance splits, divisions, or anything that makes fewer of us. We have to come out of this. We have to come out of this a party which works together, which discusses together, that debates together, but acts together against the system and against the bosses. So let me say to you, if you want to be part of it, if you want to fight racism, you want to fight fascism, if you want to fight against the attacks on disabled people, if you want to be part of the struggle against the bedroom tax, but above all else, if you want to be part of the struggle against capitalism and for a socialist future, please join us. We need more of you. We need more people. We need a stronger left. We need a stronger group of people fighting for revolution. That's what the SWP is about. Please join us.